Welcome to the LDN radio show, brought to you by the LDN Research Trust. I'm your host, Linda Elseygood. I have an exciting lineup of guest speakers who are LDN experts in their field. We will be discussing low-dose Naltrexone and its many uses in autoimmune diseases, cancers, etc. Thank you for joining us. Today's show sponsor, Care First Specialty Pharmacy. They are leading compounders of LDN and other custom treatments servicing patients in over 18 states coast to coast. They are widely accredited to provide you with the highest quality demanded by the industry and the expert service you expect. To learn more, call 844-822-7379 or visit cfspharmacy.com. Today my guest is Dr. Izabella Wentz. Thank you for joining me, Izabella.
Oh, hi. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, this is really exciting. I think nearly everybody has heard of the thyroid secret and all the good work that you're doing and the 2 books that you have written. You yourself have Hashimotos. Could you tell us your story, please?
Sure. So I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's after almost a decade of some pretty strange mystery symptoms where I had irritable bowel syndrome, I had panic attacks, I had fatigue, carpal tunnel in both arms, and it just was, ever since my first year in my undergraduate studies, it seemed like my health just kept declining year after year after year. It wasn't until I was diagnosed in 2009 when I finally felt like, okay, I finally have an answer. This is something that is wrong with me. And part of me was actually relieved to have a diagnosis. And I was excited to get started on thyroid hormones. But at the same time, I had this big sort of question, and it was, why is my own body attacking my thyroid gland? What can I do about that? Can I stop the attack on the thyroid gland? Can I find a way to feel better in addition to the medications that I'm taking? And that's sort of how I became a Hashimoto's expert / human guinea pig, was essentially trying to get my own health back and, suffering despite using thyroid hormones.
Mm-hmm. And how long did it take for you to feel, I would say normal, but to feel better, to be able to function again?
I would say it came in a stepwise process, right? So I started making some lifestyle changes in 2011. So it actually took me quite some time to digest the diagnosis and to, really think about doing research and what I could do to start changing and making some changes. And in January of 2011, I decided to try the gluten-free, dairy-free diet. And within 3 days, my acid reflux and my irritable bowel syndrome went away. And the acid reflux had been with me for over 3 years, and the irritable bowel syndrome for almost 10 at that point. So that was quite remarkable, where I thought, wow, this is something I can overcome. And then the more changes I started to make, the fewer symptoms I had. And eventually I was able to get myself into remission in 2013.
Wow. And you're a pharmacist. I believe you told me before that you don't actually have a pharmacy, but you do lots of lecturing and talks. Am I right?
I do, yeah. I'm a pharmacist by training. So I received my PharmD in 2006 and got my Hashimoto's diagnosis about 3 years later. So I was still a relatively new grad, and my work was always primarily in consulting and in public health and government. So that was what I specialized in as a pharmacist, was optimizing medication outcomes for patients. And so I was pretty well versed in research and in best practices, and I ended up using everything that I did for my clients to use it for myself to try to get my health back. And I do a lot of I do a lot of, like you said, lecturing and talking about Hashimoto's. I do writing. And then, of course, I have clients as well that are consulting clients where I will review their cases and make recommendations.
And of course, you're the author of these two amazing books. Could you tell us what inspired you to write these books, The Root Cause and the Hashimoto's Protocol?
Well, the root cause was actually my mom and my husband. So my husband had written a how-to book before, and my mom, once she started seeing all these improvements I had in my health with the changes I was making, she said, "You need to write this down. We need to get this out into the world in a bigger way." She's a physician by training, and she was, she was saying everybody needs to know about this. Everybody needs to know that if they have Hashimoto's, they can actually help themselves. They can do things on their own to make themselves feel better. And then there's innovative therapies like LDN that could be used to help people.
Mm-hmm. And what about the second book?
The second book, so the first book was a culmination of my research and my story. So everything that I noted down and found in combing the medical literature and, personal experiments on my health. And that was the first book. The second book was really a request from my readers. And they were asking, what are the specific protocols I can do to take back my health? Can you give me a specific schedule? Can you tell me which are the exact things I need to remove from my environment? Which are the things I need to add to my lifestyle to start feeling better? And this was the second book is based on my testing and work with over 1,000 people with Hashimoto's, and to sort of accelerate their healing process so that we see improvements in their symptom in as little as 2 weeks when we do the liver support protocol and we follow along the protocols. Versus, for me, it took a really long time of trial and error to figure out what things I could do to get myself better. This is meant to be a shortcut for the average patient with Hashimoto's.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's amazing, 1,000 patients that you've consulted with. 2 weeks. I mean, that is amazing. And obviously we want people to go and buy the book and find out for themselves. What would they expect to find in the book that would help them?
Yeah, so this is the liver support protocol. What I found is, and it started with some of my clients that were having multiple chemical sensitivities, right? And they would try a supplement and they'd feel worse, or they would be very sensitive to foods or very sensitive to things in their environment. And so I was trying to find a way to help them feel better because they really weren't responding to probiotics and various types of supplements that I would normally recommend. And I started digging a little bit more, and I wanted to see if I could support their liver function and support a way for them to sort of clear out the toxic backlog that they had in their bodies. People with thyroid disease, oftentimes they're not sweating properly, and so they end up not excreting toxins through sweat. They usually have intestinal permeability, so they're not excreting toxins that way. And, and there's circulating immune complexes that form to the thyroid gland with antibody complexes, and these tend to get lodged in the liver. And so we end up with this backlog, and the liver support protocol is basically removing potentially problematic things in our environment. So we're looking at the going on a personal care detox for 2 weeks where we don't use personal care products, or we replace personal care products with organic ones. We remove fluoride. We remove triclosan, both of which are chemicals that are added to our water supply and soap, respectively, that have thyroid disrupting properties. And so we're sort of getting rid of these low-hanging fruit, getting off of gluten and dairy, which is oftentimes very problematic, and then utilizing foods as well as supplements that support the liver's ability to get rid of toxins. So we're doing things like milk thistle and acetylcysteine. We're having the people do hot lemon water. We're having them take in some cilantro and take in some fruits and veggies and fiber to help bind out some of the toxins. And in a way, it sort of reduces the toxic burden and reduces that threshold a bit so that the people don't experience as many symptoms. We've seen headaches going away, more energy, the chemical sensitivities lessening and even eliminating within a 2-week process. And to be honest, it was very surprising to me at first that this was happening. I was like, oh, wow. I wasn't really trying to get rid of multiple chemical sensitivities. I didn't know that was a possibility, but we actually started seeing a lot of improvement. So that was kind of an exciting finding.
Mm-hmm. You just mentioned hot lemon water. I've heard of the use of that before. What does that actually do?
One of the great things it does is it helps to support digestive acid. So a lot of times people with thyroid disease, with Hashimoto's, will have low stomach acid. So they will either have, they'll make either no stomach acid or they'll make very little of it. And hot lemon water is a great way to start supporting that digestive process. And that usually results in the person having a better ability to digest their foods throughout the day, which then means that they're easier to break down and absorb and excrete.
Ah, well, learned something new there today. Thank you for explaining that to me. I have had the last 2, and he's doing it this year, 3rd conference, Dr. Tom OBrien. And his takeaway message is, give me 2 weeks. 2 weeks of being gluten-free, dairy-free and processed sugar-free, and you'll see, how much better you will feel. It's harder.
It's amazing.
Yes, but it's harder said than done initially, isn't it, to read the labels on absolutely everything, because gluten seems to be in 9 out of 10 things, it would seem. But as you say, it does make a really big difference. Like you, I had acid reflux, and I used to have to take a daily medicine, can't remember what it's called now. It's over a year ago since I stopped taking it. But just by going gluten-free, the acid reflux that used to come up and burn the back of my throat and was really, really awful. And I used to wake up in the night sitting up because I was going to vomit with all the acid. Amazing. It just went. Absolutely amazing. My doctor couldn't believe it. And I actually said to one of the doctors, she's now left, and I explained the diet that I was on. I have MS, by the way. I don't know whether you know. And I said, it's amazing. I've gone gluten-free, dairy-free, and this has happened and that's happened. And she said to me, so why did you go on such a restrictive diet? And I was thinking, do I explain? And I just looked at her and I said, because it makes me feel better. I didn't know what to say. But it was amazing that there are many doctors out there, and I've had people tell me that their doctors, when asked, should I be following a certain diet? Are there certain foods I shouldn't be eating? That they reply, it doesn't matter. Eat what you fancy, whatever it is you like. That is so against what you're saying and what Tom OBrien says. You really have to look after your gut as what you put in there. You can't expect your body to work effectively if you're filling it full of, let's say junk food and fast food, high sugar drinks. It's not the way, is it, to have your body running correctly?
Mm-hmm, exactly. So we see actually 88% of people with Hashimoto's feel significantly better on the gluten-free diet, and 80% feel significantly better on the dairy-free diet. We also have sugar-free is about 87% as well. So it's a significant change where people will say that they have more energy, they're able to manage their weight better, and their moods better. And these are the top 3 symptoms that we have in people with thyroid disease that are most affected is, the brain, the energy levels, as
Mm.
And a lot of times nutrition can be, and I'm a pharmacist saying this, but the nutrition can actually be more helpful than some of the thyroid hormones for a lot of patients.
Well, and it's natural, isn't it? If you're eating healthy food, it's surely got to be better than taking a lot of medication. I was reading on an email that came through yesterday that it said that sugar was 8 times more addictive than cocaine. Did you read that one?
Wow, I don't know that I've read that email, but I have seen something that said sugar was as addictive as cocaine for rats. So I have seen a study like that was done
Right.
a little few years back. So, I don't find it surprising that it is an addictive substance. And same with gluten and dairy. So they have, and they actually, people will report having withdrawal symptoms when they
Yes.
get off of those foods, and sugar as well.
Yes. It can make people feel quite ill if, in my understanding of people that have tried to give up sugar, these are people who have had a vast sugar intake, and suddenly to try and stop, having headaches and feeling really unwell just because of going through the withdrawal of not having sugar. But sugar is in everything, isn't it? Being a label reader now, in savoury foods, soups even, and soups that are marketed as healthy, with fresh ingredients, etc., etc., and they put sugar in it. Why do they put sugar in it? Is it to make it taste better? I can't think why you would need to make vegetables taste better. And we have a lot of high quantities of salt in our food over here. You probably do over there as well. But the additives are not good, especially for people that have autoimmune conditions. We need to try and get our diet back to the basics like we were eating 30, 40 years ago. Fast food has come on a long way in those years. Now, I wonder if you could tell us about the Thyroid Secret documentary series that you created.
Sure. So this was a big passion project of mine. In 2016, I traveled the country and interviewed over 160 people, actually 164 total. So they were about 100 experts, and then 64 patients with various types of thyroid conditions on various places of their healing journey. So some of them had just been diagnosed. Others had, reached remission with their thyroid conditions. And I created a 9-part documentary series that went through the whole journey of people going through, from diagnosis to remission. And within that, we had various experts talk about, and as well as I was sharing my experience with clients and what are the things that can be done to really help a person. And so we talked about the common misdiagnoses and what are some of the things that present like thyroid disease, or that present as that get misdiagnosed when it's actually thyroid disease. So things like mental health issues, fertility issues, obviously fatigue. These are all potential thyroid symptoms, and a lot of times people get misdiagnosed. And then we went through what are the various interventions that a person can do. So we talked about optimizing thyroid hormones. We talked about innovative therapies like low-dose naltrexone, cold laser therapy, stem cells. And then we talked about what the person can do on their own, such as nutrition. So we had an episode on nutrition. We had an episode on how to support the detox pathways. We had an episode all about fertility and pregnancy and children's health, about mental health, and how to support the adrenals and the gut, as well as shared a whole host of patient stories throughout. So this was really exciting, and it was meant to educate the masses about thyroid disease, the many ways it presents, and the many things people can do to take back their health.
Now, your website, www.thyroidpharmacist.com, on there, people can actually read about you, your books, the documentary series, and you have a section for resources there where there's many interesting books, different diets, recipes, and you also gave 2-week recipes away with promoting your new book. What kind of recipes do you, or what kind of cooking do you promote that people should use?
Yeah, so definitely a gluten-free, dairy-free diet is going to be very, very helpful, and I talked about some of the statistics there. There's also a protocol known as the autoimmune paleo diet, where we see a big reduction in not just symptoms, but also thyroid antibodies. And so the 2-week recipe plan is based on autoimmune paleo. And this is really a non-processed food diet. And this diet removes a lot of the potential problematic foods. Generally, proteins seem to be an issue for people with autoimmune thyroid disease. There seems to be some perhaps molecular mimicry where the body recognizes the food as a foreign invader, and there may be some cross-reactivity between the food and then the thyroid gland, or perhaps the foods are causing some intestinal permeability. So we remove the most problematic foods within this meal plan. And generally, this type of plan is to be followed for 30 to 90 days. And after that point, the person can start reintroducing a lot of the different foods to see which foods are really the main culprits. And during that time that they're off of these difficult to digest foods, we see a lot of healing taking place.
Now, I know everybody's individual, and I'm sure you recommend supplements individually for your patients. If you had to give a good basis of supplements that people in general should take, what would you recommend?
So definitely selenium. Selenium is a supplement. It's a mineral that's been found to be deficient in people with thyroid disease, in postpartum thyroid issues, in Graves' disease, and Hashimotos. And we see that 200 micrograms of it per day can help reduce thyroid antibodies by about half. We also see symptoms like anxiety reducing. We see hair loss reducing. This is something that has been recognized as an environmental trigger for thyroid disease when you don't have enough of it in place. Then vitamin D is going to be really, really helpful. I like to see, generally my ladies that are in remission will have vitamin D levels between 60 and 80. Then I also like to look at measuring ferritin levels and B12 levels and to see if that requires supplements. Ferritin is a iron storage protein, and iron can be deficient but not picked up on the standard of tests. So the ferritin test is important to determine if a person has this subclinical deficiency. When we address this level, a lot of times we'll see that people who have had hair loss, their hair loss starts subsiding. Magnesium is going to be very, very helpful. A lot of times people with pain, cramps, insomnia, constipation, anxiety, we see those symptoms improve. And there's also, when used long-term, magnesium can help normalize the appearance of the thyroid gland on the thyroid ultrasound, meaning that, some of the damage gets repaired when you use it long-term. And then thiamine, 600 milligrams a day. There was a couple of clinical trials, some very small studies that showed that this supplement can turn around fatigue in people with Hashimoto's and with Crohn's disease. And I've tested this with initially with myself and then with numerous clients, and this supplement does seem to resolve fatigue within 3 to 5 days if a person is indeed deficient. It's something that's water soluble, and there's not necessarily a good test that will measure this subclinical deficiency, but we'll find that people feel significantly better once we address the thiamine levels. So those are sort of the beginning things that I like to explore is getting micronutrients and minerals addressed that will help a person usually start feeling better.
Mm. And you have a page there on your website, which is a shop that people can go through, and that all of these different supplements you mentioned are on there. The gluten dairy digest, what actually is that?
The gluten dairy digest. So there's actually a supplement that I will recommend for people when they go out to eat.
Okay.
That can help them reduce their reaction if they were to have cross-contamination with gluten and dairy. It's not going to be something where you can go out and, have a whole pizza or anything like that. It's just meant to reduce some of the cross-reactivity.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know there was such a thing. So, as I say, if people go to your website, which was www.thyroidpharmacist.com/supplements, they're all there listed. If people would like to get hold of you, how can they contact you?
The best way is through thyroidpharmacist.com. And then we also have a Facebook page. If they search for Thyroid Pharmacist Dr. Izabella Wentz, or go to facebook.com/thyroidlifestyle, they'll be able to find my Facebook page. And usually I'll pop in there a few times a month, and I'll host some Facebook Live sessions to connect with people face to face, and I try to answer the comments and questions on the various posts that I put out.
Oh, that's very handy. And I also see from your website, you have some questions and answers there as well that people would be interested in reading.
Definitely. I put out a new set of articles every week meant to support people on their journey. So I'll share success stories, client stories, stories from readers. I'll share my own research, new research coming out, and just handy tips for everybody in taking charge of their health, because we know it's a journey, right?
Mm-hmm. And it's one that when you first diagnosed, you feel so alone when you don't know other people who've been on the same path that you're about to follow. And it's sharing experience, isn't it? It's knowing somebody said, well, that used to happen to me, but this is what I did, and I'm feeling a lot better now. It's just that positive support, isn't it, to help people when they are feeling at their weakest.
Absolutely, because when you have an autoimmune diagnosis, you can feel so alone, and like you said, you go to a traditional doctor, and they'll say that, you don't need to change your diet. And then you try to ask them about something like LDN, and they say that there's no research behind it. And, and it's natural to feel hopeless at that point. But when you see other people thriving with the same condition that you have, you begin to have that little spark of hope. And that's what gets a lot of people going through and trying these different interventions and actually getting their health back.
Mm. And from your experience, what have the results been on patients with thyroid conditions and LDN?
We find that so I surveyed over 2,000 people with Hashimotos a few years back, and we find that about 40% of people feel significantly better utilizing LDN. 48% of them have a reduction in thyroid antibodies, which means that the attack on the thyroid gland is no longer as aggressive. I've seen people who had antibodies in the 2,000 range going under 100, which is considered the remission range. And we've had, I've seen a lot of ladies who were having trouble with conception. They were able to have children. We've seen some, I don't specialize in Graves' disease, but we've also seen some people with Graves' disease that they were able to manage their condition with LDN, and they no longer needed to utilize some of the more, potentially toxic thyroid suppressing medications. We've seen, big changes in reducing the amount of allergies in improvement in mood, energy. Pain reduction has been very significant for people with Hashimoto's with LDN. So it's definitely one of the tools that I recommend for any patient that's struggling. And if usually I have them start off with nutrition, and if they're not in remission within 90 days of changing their diet, that's at that point I'll say this is what, these are additional things we need to try. And definitely if there's conditions or they're trying to conceive, then we would reach for LDN much sooner.
Well, we've come to the end of our time, and it's been amazing having you with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Today's show sponsor, Care First Specialty Pharmacy. They are leading compounders of LDN and other custom treatments servicing patients in over 18 states coast to coast. They are widely accredited to provide you with the highest quality demanded by the industry and the expert service you expect. To learn more, call 844-822-7379 or visit cfspharmacy.com. Any questions or comments you may have, please email me, Linda, Linda, at ldnrt.org. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciated your company. Until next time, stay safe and keep well.